On today's show, we're breaking down a prospect for prospect swap deal that just happened in the National Hockey League, sending Sam O'Reilly to the Tampa Bay Lightning for Ike Howard going the other way to the Edmonton Oilers. We're going to be breaking down both of their games, providing scouting reports, as well as grading how each of these teams did in the return.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down a trade that just happened in the NHL. That's very interesting because it sends two prospects going in opposite directions in a one-for-one swap deal who bring very different things to the equation. So I think both Edmonton and Tampa might get something they're really going to like here. They're just going to be two very different things. As we'll break down here today, we're going to first look over the trade as a whole, why this happened, the whole backstory and the situation going on here. And then in the second segment, we're going to be breaking down Sam O'Reilly's game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And finally, we'll be capping it off with Ike Howard's game and what he's going to be bringing to the Edmonton Oilers potentially as soon as this fall. So all that, and then also the trade grades at the very end to see which team maybe got a little bit more in this return, or at least did better from their situation than the other did, in my opinion. But honestly, both of these teams did really well, I think, but just for very different reasons, as we will explore here. So the offseason is well underway. The big free agent frenzy's kind of died down. A lot of the big trade discussions are also petering out right now. So this is a very interesting trade to have come about like a week after the free agent market opened up. And we're going to see if a secondary market kind of emerges with more deals happening. And over the course of the offseason, I will be breaking down trades that involve big name prospects so that their new fan bases can kind of latch on and see what these guys can bring for their teams. But without further ado, let's just dive straight into the show here as we break down the deal. And it all first and foremost revolves around Ike Howard, because without this situation, this trade would not have occurred. He would have likely signed in Tampa Bay, but he didn't. He actually very notably said that he would not sign in Tampa Bay. We don't actually know the details as to why of that at this moment. That has not been made public as of yet. But in terms of theories that are going around, I think that there's two that make real logical sense as to why maybe he just wasn't able to get to an agreement with the Tampa Bay Lightning. First and foremost would be around like bonuses in his ELC, like especially like the grade A bonuses. I think that's something that maybe the Tampa Bay Lightning were just like stonewalling on, of like, we can give you up to this, but we're not giving you anything beyond that. And Howard maybe feeling a little bit insulted or wanting to have more than that in terms of those negotiations. Or on the other hand, perhaps not the Tampa Bay Lightning not viewing Ike Howard as NHL ready as Ike Howard viewed himself. As we're going to dive in the third segment when we're breaking down Howard's game, this is a player that does not lack confidence by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very confident player, and that also certainly translates to his personhood off of the ice. This guy knows what he wants, and he clearly did not want the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they had to figure something out before they lost his rights next summer. So this was kind of, again, their final opportunity to kind of get something done here for Ike Howard, and they found something, and I think it's a really interesting something with the Edmonton Oilers, as I believe this is a swap of 31st overall draft picks. Ike Howard went 31st overall in the 2022 NHL draft, and Sam O'Reilly went 32nd, so not 31st, but 32nd in the 2024 NHL draft. So the two players are separated by exactly 2 years. They, interestingly enough, share a birthday, March 30th, 2004 for Ike Howard, 2006 for Sam O'Reilly. So there you go. You got two players that celebrate their birthdays at the same day every single year that got traded for each other. How often does that happen? I can't remember the last time I've seen a 1-for-1 swap deal with two players sharing a birthday. But beyond the interesting facts, what are these teams getting? And let's just go with the profiles first and foremost. So Ike Howard, 5'11", 190-pound left shot, left winger who played with the NTDP in his draft year with a whole bunch of talent in that program and has since played 3 seasons of college hockey. In the program, he outproduced the entire team, not on a per game basis, but in terms of total points, he outproduced Logan Cooley and Frank Nazar and Ricker McGroarty and Cutter Gosay, Jimmy Snuggerud, Lane Hudson. A lot of talent on that roster, and nobody was able to score more points than Ike Howard. That's not to say that he was the primary offensive driver. He was often benefiting from plays created by other players around him and was really good at making the most of those situations. But he then progressed to the University of Minnesota Duluth for a very disappointing freshman campaign in the NCAA, scoring 6 goals and 11 assists for 17 points in 35 games. That is half a point a game production, not really the expectation for a star NTDP product. But then he switched programs to Michigan State University, a team that wanted to give him a lot more of the reins to do what he wants to do in the offensive zone. And those goal scoring didn't take off. He really exploded as a playmaker in his sophomore campaign, scoring 8 goals and 28 assists for 36 points in 36 games. Adding on top of that, 7 goals and 9 points in 7 games at the World Junior Championships. And then this past season arrived, and he just exploded even more offensively for Michigan State University, scoring 26 goals. That is a rise of 18 goals over his past season and more than doubling his combined goal total in his freshman and sophomore campaigns. 26 goals, 26 assists for 52 points this previous season. The offensive potential here is certainly clear. He's very, very confident with the puck on his stick. We're going to dig in a little bit more into the why of that in the third segment as we give the full scouting report. But on paper, this is a real creative player, and he has a lot of very interesting offensive tools while also having some notable weaknesses that could hold him back from making that final leap to a top 6 NHL role that we have to kind of break down. But first, let's dive into Sam O'Reilly's profile. He's a 19-year-old, 6'1", 190-pound right shot center. He can play the wing as well, but this is a natural center developing for the London Knights in the Ontario Hockey League. And he was a late riser in the 2024 NHL draft. It was really the last 2 or 3 months going into the draft that his name started popping up more and more and more, largely in part for a very, very strong playoff performance that he had there for the London Knights last year, where he scored 5 goals and 12 points in 16 games, but was just bringing so much quality defensively. And this year, he really one-upped himself in 17 playoff games. He had 7 goals and 22 points en route to an OHL championship. So really cool stuff there for Sam O'Reilly this season. In terms of regular season production, a similar kind of jump as well, from just under a point a game to significantly over that marker. So went from scoring 20 goals and 56 points in 68 games as an OHL rookie to scoring 28 goals and 71 points this previous season in 62 appearances. He's a real two-way center. This guy works hard. He's a guy that is a player that I've also been quite impressed about in terms of the small area playmaking, the in-tight game right around the crease. He gets to the dirty areas. He's able to get a stick on a puck, whether it be a deflection from a shot from the point or a quick rebound. He's really quick in terms of his reactions and his hand-eye and his honestly a quick touch wrist as well. The handling isn't dynamic or fluid, but there's a real quickness and pace and motor to this player's game. And on top of that, defensively, this guy is relentless. From the EP draft guide in 2024, he checks the hands, ties up sticks, and torpedoes himself into opponents along the wall. This guy is a really, really interesting player who the draft guide also described as a relentless shutdown defensive center with physicality, details, and clever quick touch passing game. Moments where he's not perfectly positioned are rare, and his endless work rate allows him to impact plays many cannot. This guy's a really, really interesting player. And even though he lacks real top six upside in terms of a Anthony Cirelli light, a bottom six guy that on his ELC could provide some really, really steady minutes in a bottom six capacity for the Tampa Bay Lightning. That is worth gold, especially also now with the rising cap. You're only going to have more and more and more money available to bolster your lineup, and Sam O'Reilly is going to help you get as far as possible in that spending as you can during that ELC, because I thoroughly believe he'll spend at least 2 years of his 3-year deal in the NHL. This guy does not have a very long runway to playing NHL minutes, at least in a fourth line capacity. I think he's tailor-made for a bottom six role and is just a fascinating player, but we'll dig in more to his habits, the details, what makes him so interesting in the next segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every single game more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it just a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Alrighty, so I assume that in this section, we're going to have a lot of Tampa Bay Lightning fans paying a little bit closer attention, because we'll be breaking down the game of Sam O'Reilly, a player that, by the way, the Edmonton Oilers traded into the first round at the 2024 NHL draft in order to acquire, and there is a reason for this. He's not only a defensive stalwart, he is a high motor, almost agitator type of player, while also bringing flashes of playmaking, one-touch game in tight, under heavy pressure with an opponent draped over his back. He's able to make plays when in conditions where it's most difficult to execute, and that bodes really, really well for how he's going to transition to professional hockey first and the NHL second. This is a player that I think is only going to get better with another year in London. He'll be able to really be a not just like second line stalwart, but potentially the first line center for the London Knights as they build around him. And I cannot think of a better player to kind of inherit that Easton Cowan role with the London Knights than a guy like Sam O'Reilly. So definitely will be fun to keep track of his development next season. But let's talk about this past season first and foremost. And I'm going to start this off with a game report written by my colleague Mitch Brown at Elite Prospects. And this was from a game back in October. We'll talk a bit more about the playoffs later on in this segment, but we'll start off with the beginning of the season, because a very common theme with Sam O'Reilly is just how reliable and consistent he is. And I think that even if he doesn't crack a top 9 role, which he certainly could, he's going to be a really solid fourth liner. And that gives you a certainty that I do not believe that Ike Howard possesses as a prospect. So that's certainly a fun takeaway, I think, here for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it's, again, a very, very tight trade. You're just getting different things, and you definitely have a higher floor with Sam O'Reilly. Mitch Brown writes, O'Reilly has everything required to become a number 3 center in the NHL. The work rate is impressive, never stops moving his feet and engaging opponents, picks up threats well in advance, even non-obvious ones, switches and rotates. Though he's not carrying the puck much in transition, he finds give and goes and creates space with his off-puck movements. He had a bunch of chances in this game, including a 3 deflection chance in front of the net, fake to open up the defender before firing under a stick, scored a rebound goal after skating into the defense, creating the space behind him for the shot, and he also screened the goalie for Easton Cowan's goal. He's also a skilled passer, hitting in between the leg passes, lead passes through traffic, and occasionally opening the lane with a quick fake. At this stage, he doesn't have the dynamic skill that fills most top sixes in the NHL, but he'll be a weapon in a 3C role on a deep team. if that doesn't encapsulate an ideal like backup to Anthony Cirelli in the Tampa Bay Lightning system that can plug holes up your lineup when you need him to, or just be part of a fantastic matchup line on a third line capacity, playing 14, 15, maybe even 16 minutes a night with PK deployment, this is a very interesting player. And later on in the season, he just got better and better and better, especially as that playoff beer grew in. He was looking like a 24-year-old among his competition, even though he's just 19. He's definitely a guy that I thought looked far more mature than his age group, even his draft year. That's certainly progressed here this past year, this season as well. He's a player that I certainly respect, but more than anything, maybe want on my team. This is a kind of player that every single team should want in their organization to just fill gaps down your lineup. Every team needs these when you want to go deep in the Stanley Cup playoffs, especially when they are on an ELC and Sam O'Reilly maybe playing NHL minutes for 3 seasons on that entry level deal and doing so as a reliable center of all positions. That gives the Tampa Bay Lightning so much freedom to spend in different areas of their lineups, especially if he's able to find his footing in a third line capacity within the next 2 or 3 years, which I would give about a 40% chance of happening. I think it's certainly possible. Obviously, he's going to have one more year in junior here at the very least, but I certainly have high hopes for Sam O'Reilly. He's a fun player, and I think that Tampa Bay Lightning fans are going to be less frustrated while watching him than they would have been with Ike Howard, who is a much more inconsistent and dynamic player who can create things out of nothing, but can also disappear for shifts on end. And if you're building a team and you have a pretty solid top 6, like Sam O'Reilly is likely not going to crack that kind of lineup in a top 6 capacity for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But if you're confident with the group that you have for those roles, this is a premier talent to have for the rest of your forward core that can create a really solid spine top to bottom. You look at the Florida Panthers, they've had this player in the past years. You look at guys like Anton Lundell, not on ELC anymore, obviously, but when he first broke through, he was such a reliable force in a third line capacity on that cheap contract. And now Mackie Samoskevich, who just signed a 1-year extension at a bargain price, is also going to be doing a similar role, but from the wing in terms of bringing some more offense from the wing in a bottom 6 capacity while still being reliable and hardworking and consistent and intelligent off puck. And it's important to note that only about 3 to 6% of your ice time is spent with the puck on your stick, depending on just how dominant you are or confident you are with the puck. I think players like Patrick Kane or Lane Hudson are closer to 7, but still, like, it's a very small portion. And in terms of off puck impact, there is absolutely no contest between Sam O'Reilly and Ike Howard. So in that sense, if you want someone reliable who's going to be a part of that spine of your team moving forward for not just the next 3 years, but certainly within the next 3 years, but for the long term, for the next 10, maybe even 15 years, this guy could just be a very reliable piece in your lineup. So that's Sam O'Reilly's game. He brings intelligence, he brings physicality and details. You can always rely on him to make the right decision, and he gets hot as anything come playoff time. He scored 2 goals in the opening Memorial Cup game in a 3-2 overtime victory against the Moncton Wildcats, and he added 3 more assists in the next 4 games. This guy just steps it up when things matter most, and I think that's certainly one of the most appealing traits for a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning and what they're trying to build here at the moment. But that wraps up this second segment, and the final one will be heading over to Edmonton, where we'll see what Ike Howard can bring to the Oilers and how he could be an absolute slam dunk and maybe how he could fizzle out as well. There's an element of risk, but the upside is high. All that and more coming up after these messages. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, breaking down the game of Ike Howard. He has come out at the media scrum after being traded that he likes to go by Ike rather than Isaac. So we'll be calling him Ike Howard here on the podcast from here on onwards. And he is, as we mentioned earlier, a 5'11", 190-pound left shot, left winger, 21 years of age, which with that same March 30th birthday as Sam O'Reilly. And he just came off an absolute dominant NCAA campaign, scoring just 11 goals shy of a goal a game pace and way over that point per game margin. He was way up at the top in terms of scoring in the NCAA, trailing only Jack Devine, Aiden Thompson, Liam McGlinskey, and Aiden Fink. Everybody else in the entire league, whether it's your Cole Hudsons, your Gabe Perreaults, your Ryan Leonards, does not matter. They all scored less. So Isaac Howard was one of the most productive players in college this past season, and he won the Hobey Baker for his troubles. And it was a bit of a contentious Hobey Baker win, but that's nothing to take away from his merits this season. Just a truly, truly fantastic display with Michigan State University, who I think were the perfect program for him to transfer to after that difficult freshman campaign at Minnesota Duluth. But what makes Ike Howard tick? What makes him special? And why are there some question marks or concerns with his projection? Let's start off with the exciting stuff. And I'm going to base this around a scouting report from my colleague Daniel G at Elite Prospects, because I think it really encapsulates a game of when he's at his best. And this came against the University of Minnesota as well. So absolutely no slouches in terms of competition. It was a December 14th game against the likes of Oliver Moore and Sam Renzel and all of those guys, Jimmy Snuggerud, a fantastic program. But Howard really, really shone in this game. He writes, Howard looks more explosive. He's playing at a higher pace, and his strength is creating constant advantages at the NCAA level. He left this game with 3 goals and an assist, blowing open the score in the third period. 2 of his goals came off the rush. The first was a product of his habits throughout the game, net driving. Howard managed to jam in a dribbling puck. Shortly after, he layered a pass cross zone, leading to a snipe off the left wing. His next goal was special, though, a blend of physical skill, skating, and tools. He blew the zone early, upping his pace to get behind the defense and took the breakaway pass, but felt pressure off his back. Howard actively leaned into the back-checking pressure and flipped the puck top shelf while off balance. It was a high-end effort. This physical blending was constant. He leaned into back-checkers' lanes to allow easier access to the middle, and he won constant positioning, almost too much to handle for opponents when he drove to the inside. His play was similar off the cycle. Off puck, Howard timed his activations into soft space and was consistently open, supporting his puck carriers. He nearly scored in the second period, drifting into the hash marks and dropping to a knee after proactively setting his feet. He scored off a similar play in the third. There was some deception blending throughout this as well. Slap passes and fakes to the inside to stagger defenders. This was also a high-effort defensive performance. He made a few deft reads, in one case intercepting a dangerous centering pass, and a lot of hard head-down back checks that ended up sealing weak side passing lanes. He looks like an easy top 6 projection, maybe even a JT Miller type mold. That's exciting to hear if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan. I mean, a JT Miller type of player who can drive offense, works hard, puts his head down on the back check, gets underneath opponents, but can just make things happen under heavy physical duress at high speeds and making high skill plays in those situations. That's a slam dunk, right? Like, if you get this player consistently, there's absolutely nothing to complain about. Sam O'Reilly is fantastic, but he's not this game breaking. He does not blow games apart. He's not the difference this often in hockey games. So there's definitely a lot to be excited about here with Isaac Howard as well. But what I wanted to do was to read a different game report, and this is one from a little bit earlier from Lauren Kelly, and she writes very succinctly, Howard is more reactionary than anticipatory in his own end. He's engaged, scans, and pressures puck carriers at the point, but he doesn't always seem like he knows how to be an effective defensive player. Rarely does he engage actually along the boards, though he was more consistent and effective as a back checker in this game, able to strip pucks behind carriers. I think that's also interesting to note with this player. There is a level of inconsistency, I think, especially along the boards. There's still a lot of strength and fire that has to grow in this game in order to be a complementary piece in the top six. I don't think he's going to be driving the offense, playing with either McDavid or Draisaitl. So he's going to have to find a way to support them, to make their lives easier, and to create scoring chances. On the skill side, there's clearly not much to worry about. This player has pace. He has handling ability. He's a strong playmaker. He added a real goal-scoring acumen to his game this season as well. However, I do think that the consistency in getting to those spots and the consistency of the motor in terms of the offensive involvement still has a bit of a ways to go. So he's a guy that has seen some wobbles in his overall game since being drafted, especially in that freshman campaign at UMD. And overall, I think that he's taken some massive strides at this point and certainly has the higher upside compared to a Sam O'Reilly. But personally, I also see a relative amount of risk that he ends up being a fantastic AHL scorer that can't quite crack a bottom six in the NHL and doesn't quite have the chops or the mental pace either to keep up in a top six. I think there's more risk here than there is with Sam O'Reilly. However, the upside, if he ends up being a player that you can just plug in next to Draisaitl night in, night out, who's able to push the pace, create through his skill, and really just like make things happen, that you have players other than the big two, big three, big four in Edmonton creating offense, that changes everything. That changes so much for this team. And clearly, when the Edmonton Oilers acquired Ike Howard, they also stated, we believe he's NHL ready. They signed him to his ELC immediately, and they're thinking that he's going to win a spot out of camp. Is that going to happen? That remains to be seen. Maybe he needs a little bit of time to condition himself in the American League, especially in terms of that board physicality. He's playing on the wing. He's going to have to find himself in those situations from time to time. But if he makes it work this season, this could be an absolute home run swing. So, I think that in terms of the on paper, this is such a close trade. Both teams are getting something that I think they need and that fits their system a little bit better. So I think both teams should be happy with the returns here. I'm quite impressed that Tampa Bay was able to get a prospect of the level of Sam O'Reilly in this deal, considering the amount of leverage that they lost because it became public knowledge that Ike Howard just wasn't signing here with the Lightning, and that he was just going to walk the free agency if they didn't do anything. And the Edmonton Oilers stepped up to the plate and they paid a price, but they got a really, really interesting asset that could either be a grand slam or maybe it's a double, but we'll see what turns out here with this trade. I would love to hear your comments down below as well. Who won this trade and who lost? For me, in terms of the grades, I'm giving the Edmonton Oilers an A-. I feel like maybe there would have been a way of landing Ike Howard without giving up Sam O'Reilly. I think that it stings a little bit because this player could have been a bottom six, reliable, cheap center for you within a year's time, genuinely. Like the beginning of the 26-27 campaign, I think there's a good chance that O'Reilly cracks an NHL roster, and that could have been in Edmonton. But I will still give the Tampa Bay Lightning a tiny edge with an A grade, mostly because of what they did from the situation. I think I'm grading this a little bit less in terms of the on paper and a little bit more of the circumstances. I think the Lightning did really, really well here to get a player that is going to be a reliable, steady force in their bottom six for a really long time and could be the perfect third-line center long-term for this organization. And getting that return for a player that just wasn't going to sign an entry-level deal for you, you take that. It's also a player who's 2 years younger than Isaac Howard, was drafted just one spot lower than him. I think there's a lot to like here for both teams, but of course, the Edmonton Oilers, I think, have the higher upside with this deal. There's a much greater chance they come out like bandits from this trade than the Tampa Bay Lightning, because if Ike Howard hits and he ends up being that complement to players like McDavid or Draisaitl, you've got a very, very exciting team on your hands. And this lineup already cracked the NHL Stanley Cup Finals 2 years running. Is this going to put them over the edge? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, but that's everything here from me today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the show. And for your second listen, you're going to head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything that you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I look forward to catching you listening again very, very soon.